RestoMod, it's been a while. I know it has. It feels like it. But we got everything back, and we're going to go ahead and jump into this. And this is what I plan to do on today. My goals for today are to clean the block, install crankshaft, camshaft, timing set, piston, and connecting rods. There's a lot of little subtasks in there that we need to take care of. We're going to work those out and take care of them. What I got right here is everything I think I need to take care of all those tasks with the parts, new parts, and some of the old parts. Main caps and the pistons are actually in there, but I still haven't got it wrapped up. There's the crankshaft. What we got here is a little schematic of how I'm going to tighten down everything. When I talk about cleaning, all I'm talking about is wiping down with mineral spirits to get all the little things that the machinist didn't get off. I mean, it came back in a bag, but still there might be something in there. So just wipe it down with mineral spirits and a lint-free rag or something. So what we got here is, all right, this is a representation of the block. And when you see just a 0, it's the inner bolts, and there's the 0 with or circle with the X, that's the outer bolts. So, and what I did is I numbered them based off the book on the sequence of tightening. So you got the center main cap, and you're going to tighten the inner ones first, then the outer ones. In sequence, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and it goes on like that. You can see the numbers and just follow the sequence. Also, what we have up here is when we check the main bearing clearance, this is the clearance range we're looking for. The rod clearance range, what you're looking for. I put that up there even though I don't need it because the machinist went ahead and took care of that for me. We had some issues, and I'll talk about that later. Crankshaft in play, this is the range we're looking for that. And the ring gap, and this is for a standard ring gap for your pistons. The top ring clearance range, the center ring, and then the 2 bottom rings, the oil rings, I call it the wavy one. You do not need to gap those, from what I understand and what I read in the book. And we go down here, like I said, the inner bolts, outer bolts, and the side bolts. The inner bolts are 15 foot-pounds plus 80 degrees, outer 15 and 51 degrees. I think that's 53. That's close. And then the side bolts are just 18 foot-pounds. So we're going to go off this guidance as we go along and tighten everything down. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. All right, first up is the crankshaft bearings. Make sure you put the first to go in are the ones with the holes in it for the oil. And it's pretty dummy proof. You got a little notch right here, there's a notch right here, lines right up. All right, I already pre-cut these plastic gauges to fit the bearings, the same size as the bearings. All the mains are numbered, and number 5 goes in the different direction than the others. The others are actually pointing that way. The fine main cap points toward the front, and the rest are pointing toward the rear. All right, let's see what we got on the range. If I did this right, and if I'm reading that right. Yeah, I shake too much. I'm sorry. I can't help that. Try it again. It's right about 0.0015. And if we look at the range, main bearings, that's within that range of right there. So now we got to clean them off, and then we can go through the sequence again, and we're going to torque everything down, and this time for real. Now that we got the plastic gauge all cleaned off on the crankshaft and the main caps, the bearings, we'll go ahead and pull the crankshaft, pull it out, and lube up the bearings underneath, and then put the crankshaft back. Do the same thing for the main caps. Put those on, tighten them down. After the first inner set we tighten down, just torque. Then I'm going to go ahead and set the in play with the rubber mallet. All right, the crankshaft is in. I had a little bit of problem with the in play. For some reason, I could not find that magic number, the gap. It wasn't moving, or I was doing it wrong. So I appreciate the help from You Can Do It Too. But I ended up using feeler gauge and a dial indicator. Now the feeler gauge, I was able to get 3 thousandths. The dial indicator, I was able to, well, actually I got 4 thousandths and it was tight. The dial indicator came to, what was it? It was like 2, just over 2. So it's within that range. I'm not sure if the dial indicator was actually accurate. Every time you moved it, bumped it, it seemed like it had moved. But the feeler gauge was able to go in and out with resistance at 4 thousandths, and then at 3 thousandths it was easy. So anyhow, that's set. So we're good to go. Everything's torqued down. These are 15 with 80 degrees. These are 15 with 51 degrees. And the outside bolts are, there's 10 of them. Those are just 18 foot-pounds. So the next thing we're going to focus on, since it's staring me in the face, is I'm going to put the lower sprocket on the timing chain. since it's right there. And then I'm going to put the cam in. I just cleaned it and it's ready to go. So we'll lube it up and slide it in there really carefully. But what we're going to do, I noticed that a couple guys, they use the old sprocket. Well, I don't have an old sprocket. I only have the only sprocket. I didn't buy a new one. But what I'm going to do is I have this 2.5 inch pipe, exhaust pipe, fits right on there. I'm going to use that to set it in. So let's get going. Decided to put a little braking oil on there just to help it get on there. Just make sure you line up the groove. There's a groove inside there. Make sure you line it up. All right, here's the new camshaft. I'm going to go ahead and use the Lucas High Performance Assembly Lube, only because it's handy and it's in a bottle, squeeze bottle. Oh, started on the wrong side. All right, I went ahead and flipped the engine over. Next we're going to do is, we're going to work in this area. I went ahead and cleaned it up. This is the camshaft retaining plate. The kit that I bought came with a new plate. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. It does have recessed holes for your bolts. I'm using the older bolts. It doesn't look like it's going to affect it at all, so I'm going to go with that. These are 10 millimeter, just for reference. All right, next up we're going to put the timing chain on with the, I'm using the old sprockets. You already saw me install that. And I got a new timing chain. I measured it to the old timing chain. Doesn't look like any difference, but this engine had 315,000 miles on it. So, I don't know. It didn't like having any player in it, but we changed it anyways. You got to remember to line up the dots. These are 26 foot-pounds. Well, if you didn't catch it earlier, I did forget to put the chain on. But it's on now. Remember, these are 26 foot-pounds, 3 bolts, and make sure you line up the little notch or dimple on the lower sprocket and the upper sprocket. There's a dimple. Well, when I looked at my my kit, all the where I found the cam retention plate, I did find the bolts that came with that, and they are flush mounted bolts. And you see right there, and they're a star, a hex. It's a T40. Anyways. I pulled everything off. I put those on. I torqued them down, 18 pounds. And remember these, 18 pounds. And remember these are 26. And I checked the in-play for the timing set. And you're supposed to have, I think it's between 1 and 10 thousandths or something. Well, I have 2 thousandths. I'm not going to show you, but I have 2 thousandths in play, and I use that dial gauge, but I'm not going back. Next up is the pistons. What we're going to do is we're going to turn the engine on its side. We're going to put a ring in there, and we're going to gap all the rings for each piston, lay them out, and then we're going to go ahead and put the pistons in. So let me start on that. Got the block flipped over. This is the number 1, because this is the driver's side. Yeah, this is the driver's side, so that's the first piston. So I got all the pistons lined up right here. There we go. All lined up. I've already cleaned them off. Everything. If you didn't know, I use the old rods, because one of you guys pointed out to me when I was doing the teardown that these are Gen 4 rods, which are better than the Gen 3 rods, which the engine originally came with. So, and there was nothing wrong with them, so I reused them. And I have new bearings in there, and this is obviously a new piston. Some of the great thing, I'm pretty sure that means forward. There's an F right there. Means forward, and all on these pistons, the little mark right there, that's forward as well. Oh, there it is. And it goes all the way down. Also, they're marked, the machinist marked it. This is the number 1, and I marked the top as that being forward as well. So redundancy is keys to success, I guess. This is the first rings that are going in. I got to measure them first, but if you look at it, you can see that the ring has a little dimple on it, and they all have a dimple on them, and that's what is facing up. The second rings have not a dimple, but just like a stamp, so that is going up. According to the instructions, sometimes they're stamped, sometimes they have a dimple, but that is the up. Now, and then the third set of rings, I do not have to gap, because you're actually going to sandwich the 3 rings together. Okay, here's the third ring. You have the wavy one, then you're going to have a ring above it and below it. So that's what's going to be in the groove. You're going to sandwich this in between. I'm pretty sure, I'll check again, but that's how I'm going to do it. All right, so I already slid a ring in there. Sorry, got ahead of myself. Then I'm going to take the piston. I'll go ahead and push it down so I make it perpendicular. Then I get my feeler gauge. And from what I got, the gap on the first one is 0.009 through 0.017. So let's go ahead and start off with 0.009. This is actually 0.009 and it moves freely through there. Focus. There we go. Oh, out of focus. That is not working. There you go. Moves freely through there. So we're good to go. Gap's good on that. All right, here's the second ring. Let me show you that stamp, if I can find it. There it is right there. That's up. And one of the reasons I'm pretty sure it's up, if you look at the directions, this ring matches that right there, and the grooves are on the downside, and the stamp is on the top. So that's the only reason I'm picking that as up. Well, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to lower this in. Take the piston, push it down. And the second ring is 0.009 to 0.0196. And this is 0.010 and it's going through, so we fit that criteria. All right, that one got all the way up to 0.014. So we're well within the criteria. This is the second ring for the first piston. So what I'm going to do is pull that out, and I'm going to go ahead and finish all the other ones, and then I'm going to install the rings so we can install these pistons. So I'm going to go do that. All right, let me show you what I'm doing. I'm putting on the rings in the pistons. All right, you got your piston in here. I've already cleaned everything off. And the ring's already been measured, so we're going to install them. You have three slits all the way down. Clean it out, and just, you can take your new ring and then put it in there to check for burrs or anything like that, because you need to address that at this point anyways. But you have, like I said, you have number one ring, number two, you have an oil expansion ring, pretty sure that's the name of it. I'm going to call it that. Then you have two smaller rings that sandwich this oil expansion ring on the bottom level. Something neat or need to know about the expansion ring is it has, on the inside, it has like a little lip. I know you can't see it. You're just going to have to trust me. A lip on the inside, on the top and the bottom. So when you load one in here, what you're going to do is you're going to load this first. Swing it around and it falls in line. Also a good point right now. See how I loaded it in on the, I'll call it the lightning side, where the opening is on the expansion ring. So you don't want all the openings of all the rings on one side. So you have to stagger them, and I'll talk to that as I show you how I'm putting these in. So you take one of the rings that go over the oil expansion ring, and since the lightning bolt's right here, I want that opening right there, so I'm going to start it at that point. And I'll just put it right in that groove right above it, and then just kind of work it down with your finger all the way around. And it'll fit in that top groove. Now sometimes the oil ring will pop out and overlap itself, so you're gonna have to fix that en route. All right, there we go. All right, so it's flush, and you have the metal ring above on the top, and then you have the expansion ring, and there's the connection right there, and then there's the connection here. So you take this other one and put the opening over here so they're not all mashed together or lined up. So this one's going on the bottom, so we just need to get it on there and slide it in. It should work out real easy. Just guide it around with your fingers. Get it down there and it should slide right in there. And it did. According to the book, have the openings that close together, that's fine for that ring. All right, here's the second ring. Remember, on the larger rings, this one and this one, they have marks for up. There's the mark on there. You just have to trust me on that. There's a mark. It's just like a stamp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that up front. So they got the F's for up front and that little mark right there for the front. So I'm just going to put it in the groove and just kind of walk it around. Whoops. Start it in the groove. Swing it around to the back, and we should be good. And there it is. So we know that opening's up front. So we'll turn it around and we'll put the last one in. Now the last one has a dimple right there. So we'll go ahead and put that in. It's also marked red and white. I don't know why. So all you're doing is the same thing. Start it by putting it in the groove, and then work it around with your fingers. There we go. Okay, that one's in. So this one's opening there. Second one's opening there. And these three are opening over here. And that's all you do is put the rings in. That's what I'm talking about inside the book. And that's exactly what I did. You got one opening, second opening, and the other two or other three over there. So we're good to go. It's time to install the pistons. Everything's ready. Everything's been, get that out of the way. All the rings are on and we got our tool ready. I already did one just to see how it went. So first off, let me explain why I am not checking the gap on the rods. Because I went out and these are the original rods. I went out and got the Arp bolts, which was recommended by pretty much everybody out there. Don't reuse the old ones. I was like, okay. So I got the Arp bolts. Well, when you torque them down to the specifications, it'll oval out this opening. I read on the internet, on some of the Camaro forums, that'll oval out the opening of your piston there, or rods. So what I had to have done is I had to have these honed out or bored out so they're round again, and these are a different bearing that I had to use, and I don't have the box with me, so I don't know which bearings they used. And the machinist said that he is going to check the gap with his gauge that he has there. I don't know what it's called, but it checks the gap in here, It also checks it on the crankshaft. He said I do not have to check the gap. Everything's good to go. So I'm going to go with that, and that's why I'm not checking the gap. Anyways, but to start out, what I'm doing is I went through and I put on braking oil on a rag, or a blue cloth, those shop rags, and I just wiped down the inside of the cylinder. I did it for all of them. This is 2, 4, 6, and 8. I also wiped down the piston. So before we stick the piston in, remember you got to make sure the rings, the gap, the opening in the ring is where you want it. And where you want it is not lined up with each other. So the top ring is over here on the back side. I'll make sure that. And it's this particular one has red and white, but that's where the opening is. It's pretty cool they marked it that way so you can see it. Second one is on the forward, and then you turn to the right to the lightning bolt, and that's where I have the oil expansion ring. You got a gap right there, and there's a gap way over here, so it's good to go. And the expansion ring part is right there. So we're good. So, and this is forward. You got that mark right there? But make sure you take the cap off. All right, there you go. I took the cap off the rod. So we're gonna go ahead and lower this down. Here's the ring compressor. I'll open it up. All right, there you go. All right, swing it around the engine and push the piston up and get it to a point where you're close to the crankshaft. You have to put Sevely lube on the bearing. I'm being generous with this, so I don't want things to mess up. Excess, just put it on the crankshaft. Now reach underneath and finish pushing up the piston. Guide it in with your fingers. Grab your cap, put lube on that as well. Hey, also remember when you're moving all this stuff around, these bearings might pop out, so make sure they're still seated. And this is. There's my mark right there. I used to make sure it goes on the front. And these rod and caps are broke or cracked, so they'll line up perfectly. All right, these are the ARP bolts, and what I put on them is that high torque grease. I just put some down on the threads and right underneath the head. All right, there it is. That's the 1 and 2 piston with the rods connected. So I just finger tight, and I have to look it up again, but I think it's 40 foot-pounds or 45 for the ARP bolts. The last 4 on the ARP bolts is 6006. So I have to look at that. But I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest, and I'll come back when I'm done. All right, all the pistons are in, but before we turn it over and I show you the finished product there, we're going to go ahead and torque down these ARP bolts, which I looked online. They're saying 45 pounds per square inch. So we're going to go ahead and torque them to those specs. But before we do that, we need to check the rod clearance side by side, more or less. It's the clearance between the two rods. It's supposed to be 0.004 to 0.020. I think 0. But anyways, what I'm going to go ahead and just throw on there is 009, see if that works, or 008. Or we'll start off with 008. And where you're measuring is just slide it in between. 008 is fine. That's a little tight right there. All right, I pulled out 006 and that works out fine right there. Same with that one, and I'll do that one before I flip it over. But I'm going to go ahead and torque these down to 45 pounds. All right, there it is. All the pistons are in. The camshaft's in, crankshaft, and the timing chain, timing set, backing plate, and everything's to specs or close to it. Recapping, goals, we cleaned the block, we installed the crankshaft, we installed the camshaft, we installed the timing set, we installed the pistons and connecting rods. At this point, you want to go ahead and crank your crankshaft to see if you notice anything that's hitting or there's a binding or something like that. Stop what you're doing, figure out what it is, and correct it. Don't go on from here. See if I can turn this one hand. Oh. There we go. That's not bad. That sounds good. It's rubbing, which it's supposed to be. All right, that's all I'm going to do. Thanks for watching, and as soon as the parts come in, we'll go ahead and tackle put on the oil pump and the plates up front. Also, we got to put on the oil pan. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time on Alien RestoMod Garage.